Satguru Maharaj ki jai, Sacha Darbar ki jai. Thank you for joining us at Divine Light Awakening Center for today's spiritual discourse. Today, I want to speak about prayer. Jesus once said, "Ask and ye shall receive." In this simple way, all of the life of prayer and our life in general is summarized. If you want something, just ask. Whatever you want, just ask. This morning, I was sitting in the car with my daughter, and she was feeling sleepy. So she told me to turn off the lights in the car. So I turned off the lights. Then she told me to block the window. So I blocked the window. And then she pointed to the sun, and she said, "Now turn off this light." And then I laughed at her. I said, "I can turn off the car light, but the sun, for that you have to wait a few hours until it turns off on its own." Kids don't have any concept of what is the right thing to ask for and what is the impossible thing to ask for. When something comes to them, they just ask. There is no idea that it is inappropriate to do this or ask for this, or if I ask for this thing, I'll be told it's impossible. In our own lives, when we pray or when we hope for something, when we want something in our lives, it is always within these constraints of our conception of reality. We believe certain rules to be set. We believe these rules to be set in stone, that this thing is possible and that thing is possible, but this other thing is completely impossible. And it never enters the realm of our thoughts. It never gets entertained in our mind as a possibility. Jesus also asked his disciples to become like children. What is the benefit of becoming like a child? As a child, you don't know that something is impossible. For years and years, people said that you're not going to have electric cars. It's not possible. There's too many roadblocks. But on the road, there's Teslas all over the place now. Every car manufacturer has electric cars. Maybe a little over 100 years ago, 150 years ago, it was considered impossible that a man should be able to fly like a bird in the sky. But a couple of brothers came along, the Wright brothers came along. They flew. It was impossible, but it was done. For centuries, for thousands of years, it was considered impossible for man to fly. But the impossible became possible. Because why? Somebody asked the question. Somebody thought about it. Why is it that this is impossible? And they expanded their view to include things that were previously impossible to become possible. In this way, children are great, because the restraints, the constraints that we put on ourselves by long time experience. We think to ourselves, I've lived so long. Even if we haven't lived that long, all the time that we lived, we've experienced all that, and we take this to be the totality of possibilities, the totality of our experience. It doesn't occur to us, even though we know, factually we know this is true, that we haven't experienced everything. We don't know everything. We don't know 100% what's possible and impossible, but we put these limitations on ourselves. when we limit ourselves in our daily life, in what we pray for, in what we hope for, in what we ask for, then we limit the power of God in our life. We limit the power of prayer in our life, because we will only pray for those things which we think are in the realm of possibility. And we won't be like children. Children ask for anything. It doesn't occur to them. This cannot happen. So, how are we to remove these restraints that we have placed on ourselves of determining what is possible and what is impossible? When we can withdraw our senses and rise above ourselves, rise above our daily mundane life to something higher, to the spiritual self, then we can look from outside of our current experience. If all we've ever known and all we've ever done is restricted to our body, then we will think that it's the only thing that is real. It is the only reality. But through meditation, you are able to raise your consciousness to a higher level and perceive the same life from a different perspective. And the higher you rise, the more wide angle view you get of your own life, of all of life. Many years ago, people could never imagine that there would be such accurate maps of the whole world. In order to make a map in the past, people would have to travel from place to place, measuring where rivers end, where they curve, where a mountain is, where the mountain pass is, where the valley is. And they would make rough maps and give directions to other people. Once man was able to fly, and once we were able to put satellites in the sky, we were able to create such accurate maps that anyone can find their way anywhere in the world without knowing where they're going. Just you have the map, and a GPS tells you, oh, this is the exact spot you're at right now. If man had never risen above, he wouldn't be able to see everything that's going on and pinpoint exactly where he is and exactly where he needs to go. So if we are able to raise our consciousness, if we are able to withdraw from the senses and elevate our mind, elevate our consciousness, then those things which we had never perceived before, we perceive. And when we perceive something outside of the normal, outside of our normal experience, what happens to our view? It expands. The more that our view expands, the less things become impossible. And then in your prayer, in your asking, in that ask and you shall receive, there is no limit. Once, a disciple went to Swami Ramakrishna, and he said to him, once you told me that God grants the wish, God grants every prayer of his devotee. Is it really true? How is it possible? So he tells that devotee that yes, it's 100% true. But you have to understand something. In your mind, if God made you wealthy beyond imagination, it would be a big thing. But to me, that's not important. Think about this, that this tiny, insignificant man as insignificant as a worm, unable to do anything on his own. God has promised that He will give Himself to that tiny, insignificant worm. That He will allow that tiny, insignificant worm to realize, to comprehend, to bask in the glory of that infinite, eternal, unending bliss. Now, if it is possible for a worm, for an almost nothing, to gain that experience, to gain that blessing which is the presence of God, then what else remains that is impossible? Because already what's impossible, what's improbable has been promised. What's left outside of that? It is only worldly men who think that to gain wealth is something. To gain power is something. To gain anything that is material will one day perish. Anything that comes into existence also one day goes out of existence. So, what is there to ask for? What is the greatest thing to ask for? He said that is that God should bless you with His vision. That God should bless you with His presence. There is no greater miracle. There is no greater reward. There is no greater riches than to be granted this thing. And as you meditate, as you pray, and as you perfect your devotion, you will come to see the truth of this statement. But since at this point, your mind dwells only in your body, your consciousness has not risen, you don't see the value in any of those things. I have someone I work with, and since he was a kid, he said he loved garbage. And when he told me this, I laughed. He said, since I was a kid, I loved garbage. On garbage night, I would go out, find everyone's trash and gather it together. By the time he was 13 years old, he had filled up his dad's garage. And once the garage was filled, he started putting things on the side of the garage. Then he started putting it in the house. And no one could understand what was wrong with him. Why do you like to collect so much junk? He couldn't stop. He kept collecting and collecting and collecting. Eventually, got older, and this habit of collecting junk turned him into an antique dealer. And he would still clean out junk. I think there's a company now that's similar to his, 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And he said, I found out that people would pay me to go to their house and take their junk. And I'd take their junk, bring it back, and I'd find out that this useless trash that these people were throwing away was sometimes worth thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, occasionally hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they were paying me to get rid of it. This was like a dream come true. All his life, this accumulation, this habit of taking all this junk. But it had value. And the people who were giving it away, who were paying him to take away their junk, they didn't see the value in what they were throwing away. But he would take those things, look around, find out who this thing was important to, and he would sell it back to that person. Taking what was completely worthless in the eyes of one person and finding that person who saw its value. For those people whose life begins and ends with their body, only things that bring comfort to the body, have value. For those whose consciousness is elevated, there are spiritual things that bring comfort. And those whose consciousness is not elevated, they take that, they see like it's junk and they throw it away. And every day, this is made apparent in the world that we live. Above all, we value entertainment. Above all else, we find ways to kill time. Just like people who throw away these valuable antiques. Maybe they're holding something that's worth thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Say, oh, this is taking up space. Let me get rid of it. When we kill time, when our sole goal is entertainment, is amusement, what are we doing but taking this valuable, precious treasure of time, of our attention? Why is attention so important? Take a kid, goes to school, 10, 12 years, goes to a little bit more school, 4 or 5 years. All of a sudden, that kid can save your life. Maybe do heart surgery. What did the kid do? This a little baby who can't speak a word in the matter of 20 years can save your life. It's consistently paying attention. Not much else to it. Consistently paying attention to one thing, and now this person is a doctor. Consistently paying attention to one thing, and now this person can build you a bridge. Consistently paying attention to another thing, and now this person can build you a house. Consistently paying attention to art, and now this person can paint a beautiful painting. Consistently paying attention to anything, it builds a skill. It builds anything. Whatever you pay attention to, that thing will grow, that will build up. So when this killing time, seeking entertainment, seeking amusement, it's taking that attention that can turn a person into a doctor or an engineer or an artist, anything. That's how powerful attention is. And we take that attention and we say, you know what? Let me find something to just take up this attention because I have so much of it. I have so much time. Let me find something that I can just throw this into. So, back to the original point, that this person I work with found those things. People throw away valuable things all the time. We throw away our valuable attention all the time. We throw away our valuable time all the time. And if we can do it, to raise our consciousness a little bit, we will see the value of our time. We will see the value of our life. We will see the value of every breath that we take, of every day that we live. We will see the value of every heartbeat. We will understand it. And when we understand it, then we can find the value in it. Then we can understand and see the value in it. And then we can truly benefit from it. So, ask and ye shall receive. What is it that we are to ask for? The highest thing that we can contemplate, the highest thing that we can understand. The higher we raise our consciousness, the greater things we know that we can ask for. And the greatest of this is the presence of God. So ask. Elevate your consciousness and ask. And today, maybe let's do an experiment. once you're done watching, listening, ask and know. The person who asks and knows that they're going to get what they're asking for, there is great strength in that asking. The person who asks and feels that this is impossible, whoever asks and puts that restriction on their asking, on themselves, it's like going to the restaurant, ordering food, and then going home before they bring it for you. Ask and you shall receive. बोलिए सतगुरु महाराज की जय, सच्चे दरबार की जय.